I'm a person who never makes the same mistake twice. Yeah, that's because I actually prefer to do things 5, 10, sometimes even a dozen times just for good measure. Yeah, I like to make sure I really get the lesson. Yeah, and nowhere was this pattern more evident than in my romantic relationships. But being a repeat offender, it's not been all bad, right? I do have at least one valuable life lesson, and that is that every one of my breakups has helped me. Now, the version of me that was crying on the internet may not have agreed with that statement, but that's okay. Because see, for a long time, I thought that my breakups meant that I was failing at something, that I was failing at love, maybe I was failing at life, or even worse, I was failing at being myself. I thought that my relationships ending meant that I was doing something wrong. I was trusting wrong, I was loving wrong, maybe I was choosing wrong. But I discovered with time that I wasn't choosing the wrong people all the time. Not all the time, right? But I was choosing from an unhealed version of myself. But the good news is that I want to share with you is that every ending is actually an opportunity for a new beginning. The way I see it, relationships are kind of like mirrors. And I say this as someone who's on a spiritual journey of healing and manifesting and self-reflection. And so I know that we don't always attract what we want, we attract what we are. And the reason that we repeat these patterns in our relationships oftentimes is because they feel familiar to us. It feels safe, right? And that and the fact that we can pretty much justify all of our toxic traits in the name of love or trauma bond. Sometimes even a lesson that we just haven't yet integrated. But that's the good news, because your patterns don't mean that you're broken. Now, your picture may be a little bit off, but that's a TED Talk for another day, okay? But your patterns don't mean that you're broken, and you can absolutely learn to heal yourself. The thing about our relationships and the people that we choose is they don't just tell us something about the people that we choose, they also tell us something about who we believe ourselves to be. After every one of my breakups ended, I did what most people do, right? I overanalyzed some conversations. I reread some text messages again and again. I asked my friends, I asked my family, I asked the internet, because when in doubt, ask the internet. But there was one thing that I never thought to question, and that was the relationship that I had with myself. For every one of my external relationships that ended, it gave me an opportunity to examine an aspect of an internal relationship that I had never even considered before. So these included things like my own self-worth, my boundaries and lack thereof, my fear of abandonment, my need for validation. It was pretty intense, as often is the journey of self-discovery, but it was one that I highly recommend. Because something else I learned along the way is that your personal relationships ending is not a personal failure. It's not. It's actually feedback. You can think of your breakups kind of like data. But what happens most of the time is we're so busy in our heads, we're so busy blaming ourselves that we forget to read the report. The ending of my relationships taught me something really valuable about healing. I learned that healing doesn't start with answers. Healing starts with awareness. I didn't heal because somebody apologized. I didn't heal because somebody tried to come back. No. I healed when I started paying attention to my own thoughts and the meanings that I was assigning to those thoughts. The thing about breakups is So here's what we know about science. Science tells us that the brain doesn't just store memories, it also stores meaning. So every time that you experience an emotionally charged experience, your brain strengthens those neural pathways. So every time you experience a trauma or a loss or a heartbreak, the brain reinforces the story that's attached to it. And if you tell a story long enough, it stops feeling like a story and it starts feeling like the truth. Repeated self-talk, whether positive or negative, becomes your belief. Belief becomes your identity, and your identity is who you are and how you show up in the world. So something else that you may not know, I'm actually a textbook introvert. And I have the Myers-Briggs scores to prove it. And it's been in my solitude and in my stillness where I've healed the most and learned a lot about myself. It's been in this stillness that I've been able to listen to the thoughts that I'm telling myself and the meanings that I'm assigning to them. I've been able to recognize the thoughts that I'm choosing and the ones that are playing on autopilot. Because if you don't actively work to rewire that inner voice, your old story is going to continue to play on autopilot. So at the very lowest point of my last breakup, I did what a lot of people probably won't admit to doing. I Googled how to feel better after a breakup. I'm not proud of that, but in my defense, the only reason that I used Google was because ChatGPT didn't exist back then, but that's not the point. The point is, something that started out as survival just for myself turned into something much bigger than myself. So I started out with this little blog, and in the beginning, it was just a way to get it out of my head, out of my system. But then it grew into something else, and at a certain point, y'all, it outgrew the blog, and the research that I was doing, it was straight up academic at that point, y'all, to the point where it led me to enroll in a 2-year program and complete my master's degree. So yes, I literally defended my thesis on my breakup. So if that doesn't make me a subject matter expert, then I don't know what will. Yes, you know. I also wrote my first book and became a certified life coach and built a global community of women on digital platforms all over the world. But the thing that I'm most proud of and most grateful for is finding my true voice. Because when I found my voice, I didn't just change my life, but I created a space for other women to feel seen and less alone. For a long time, I thought that my relationships ending meant that I had lost myself, but I didn't lose myself. I just forgot who I was. Finding my voice helped me realize that I don't need to speak louder for others to hear me. I just need to listen more closely to myself. My whole perspective on breakups now is completely different. Like, I don't even look at breakups as a punishment. I don't. I actually see them as invitations because breakups do invite us. They invite us to awareness. They invite us to discernment, and they invite us to personal growth if we're willing to listen. And sometimes they end up leading us to the place exactly where we need to be. Kind of like me standing here on this stage today. Every single one of my breakups has helped me. And not because they ended, but because they finally taught me to listen to the lessons that they were trying to teach me all along.